I really don't like personality tests. The internet is naturally full of them, all dressed in the guise of promise that they will help you uncover the nuanced depths of your personality. And of course, few positions in this universe are absolute. So yes, one can certainly learn something and benefit from them. I'm not saying they are completely pointless or stupid. What I don't like is when people use them naively. There is a real danger that such archetypal results may become an excuse. One-dimensionality of these tests could tempt an individual to think about himself also one-dimensionally. One can, for example, based on the results, embrace that he is simply an introvert and he will always be one. And then he builds his whole character around this one trait. Or he decides that from now on he will, with every tiny bit of his existence, be focused solely on portraying the role of a masculine leader. In other words, he will not study the actual complicated depth of his subconscious, and he will remain under the illusion that he should be representing only one of many archetypes constituting his inner world. Moreover, the one that is closest to him, one which demands the least effort and personal growth. The situation when a person falls under the control of a singular subpersonality is called ego inflation. One subpersonality, naturally, lacks a whole plethora of tools, skills and values, which are in the domains of other subpersonalities. Such a person, living under the supremacy of incomplete parts of his mind, is missing many necessary mechanisms. He can't even see the bigger picture of what he is actually missing. To put it simply, personality tests are a representation of the naive idea that it is okay to spend your life drawing with that one nice crayon you found first in preschool. And don't get me wrong, it is absolutely desirable for you to be your own authentic being. You were born in some way with some talents and inclinations, and that is great. But you at least need an awareness of those other crayons which may not come so naturally to you. In many ways, this works not only on a personal level, it echoes to higher abstractions. Our whole mainstream society is incredibly one-sided and naively one-dimensional, at least in the realm of key institutions. We are essentially too specialized in one limited frame without being masters of all others. But without this, we cannot achieve true maturity and true harmony, for we are missing the so-called bigger picture. A better approach to the classification of a human being and to the analysis of our inner world is one that offers understanding of the mechanism of our mental alchemy, so to speak. And for this approach to be ideal, it needs to give not only the description of the process, but also a vision of a healthy path forward. It has to point us in the direction of growth. Such an approach to the study of the human mind, as well as many other domains, is the incredibly useful tool of esoteric, hermetic interpretation of the ancient teachings known as Kabbalah. And don't worry, for the purposes of the following video, I will stay as secular as I can morally be. So, within the upcoming show, I shall present to you the dissection of the human mind and introduce you to the teachings of Kabbalah in a secularized, guerrilla way. And finally, here and there, I will spice things up with societal diagnosis exceeding the limits of single individual. In this manner, I am compressing like 2 or 3 introductory essays into one video, which I find incredibly neat. Welcome to Magne Mirare. Just a side note, if you like the music you hear in my videos, it is a product of my year-long orchestral journey, which you can now listen to on my second channel called Forte Mirare, link in the description. Before we get into the labyrinthian mechanism of the human mind, I cannot but spend some time explaining the tradition I will use for our purposes. I need to establish at least a basic vision of its mode of operation. You may know Kabbalah from pop cultural mainstream references, where the picture is of course incredibly skewed. You may also know that This is an old Jewish rabbinic tradition. It of course is, but the interpretation I will be using is quite far from its origin. I will not be talking much about its religious value or about its misinterpretations in the realm of pop culture magic. The term for my favorite branch of the tradition would be Hermetic Kabbalah, one stemming from medieval philosophical alchemy. And I will use a modern interpretation of this ancient alchemical method. And know that in many ways this is my personal interpretation. A lot of my thoughts on the matter come from personal daydreaming. The first and easiest thing is to realize that kabbalistic tree of life is a diagram trying to map the universe. Observed lived universe shown and studied through compressed symbols. In a sense, this is the same method as is the Norse tree Yggdrasil, or yogic chakras, or the family trees of polytheistic pantheons like the Greek gods. The core of this method is the description of symbolic domains and their relations through an infographic, with the goal of describing the mechanism of existence. Kabbalah is not a doctrine, it is not a dogma. It is a useful tool akin to a ruler you use to measure length. You may differ in the usage of units, centimeters or inches, but the measured length is the same. But this tool goes beyond specific length and specific scale. In my video about the three-body problem series, I talked about the fractal nature of our universe, and that patterns in fractals repeat across scales or magnitudes, or even levels of abstraction. And the goal of this methodology, based upon a conceptual tree, is to measure the scale-free pattern. As above, so below. One thing is to understand a specific issue, being an expert in a limited realm, and another thing is to study that which is common to all conceivable issues. This universality is the goal of this kind of method. It is a search for that which unites macrocosm and microcosm. Such a method is the kabbalistic tree of life. You see before you 10 spheres, which are called sephirot, the word meaning something like subsequent enumerations. Sephirot being plural and sephira being singular. For now, let's just think of them as 10 different intertwined symbols, 10 analytical categories, you can say. Their relations and constructions are simply incredibly useful when studying anything, and you would be surprised in how many different fields they've actually helped me to conceptualize a certain architectural approach. This is an analytical tool, and I want to make absolutely clear that there are many similar ones. It is essentially meant to measure relations in general, such as, for example, a duality. This here is the topmost sephira, called Kether, the crown. And here at the bottom lies a sephira named Malkuth, meaning a kingdom. Everything between them can be understood as a study of the gradient relation between these two outermost concepts. What is their specific content, we shall see in later chapters. In the same manner, you can study any duality in the tree itself. Here are the sephirot of Binah and Hokmah. And as you can see, you can project another smaller tree between them and use it to study their relation. The tree is capable of being used to study itself in different scales essentially, which is actually a good indicator of the method working. Through this, it achieves sort of a glitch. It latches itself onto more universal patterns than those who are localized and obvious, which I find incredibly neat. So these would essentially be the basic gists of the method of Kabbalah I will be using to analyze the human mind. The complex nature of the tree means there are many possible entry points to it. But in our situation, we will be building it from its roots. The process will be like construction of a tower, from the material ground to the heavenly abstraction. Our path begins in the Sephira of Malkuth. This is a symbol representing the material world itself, the heavy matter, the dense stuff. In the context of human being, this would also entail our body. However, we have to realize that there is only one way we can interact with this dense matter. On this level, we feel both our body and the outside world solely through the senses. They are the key interface. If you could not touch and feel subsequent concepts of weight, pain, temperature, or sound, these being the secondary calculation based on molecular feeling of mass and its vibrations, if you could not smell and taste, these being the chemical analysis, and if you could not see, this being the electromagnetic analysis, you could argue that there is hardly any connection to the world at large. You wouldn't be able to even conceptualize there is anything outside this senseless experience. So to close Malkuth, it might be more sensible, since we are focused on study of the shared qualia of inner human existence, to conceptualize it simply as the world of everything that the senses reveal. And since the senses have a very small bandwidth as compared to the presumed fullness of the outer world, they form only a small bridge between the one Sephira representing the outside world, Malkuth, and the bifurcating complexity of the remaining 9, which are resting firmly embedded in our inner existence. You see, I do not deny the world its complexity, but simply through the volume of flowing data, our inner world is simply much richer experientially, if you know where to look, but not all do. I presume most of you are knowledgeable of the NPC meme, which is starting to get some scary weight behind due to the growing number of reports showing just how small a fraction of people actually experience inner monologue. It seems that being able to perceive your inner world is a skill like any other. And by inner monologue, I do not mean only the inner speech, but also images or higher symbolic feelings and ineffable concepts. NPCs would be a large number of people that never even mastered or at least outgrew the world of Malkuth, the world of senses. We all know of people who are incapable of pursuing any higher life goal. People who completely fell to the sensual hedonism of dopamine and pleasure. Drug addicts would be a prime example of people stuck in the Malkuth. And of course, for a serious addict of any kind, there probably is something heavy keeping him in the lower realm. Perhaps some dark trauma, keeping him from observing his own depths. But also look at how many people are absolutely swept off their feet by the dopaminergic trash of TikTok. A specific feature of people who are disbalanced in such a manner is that they lack any broader vision of their life or world in general. They are just stuck in their vices and do not see the forest for the trees. A similar term for this state would be the Gnostic word helik, from the Greek hyle, meaning wood, wooden people, people of dense matter. From the Gnostic point of view, this would be the vast majority of the population, and if modern research is right, this could be anywhere from 50 to 70%. Still, I sincerely do hope that these kinds of studies simply omit those who think in pictures or feelings, etc. And to the quality of the research I do not know anything, and at this moment I do not particularly care. But these numbers, however harrowing from modern view, would be probably incredibly optimistic as far as human history goes. There is a reason why every religion started at a great mystical base full of deep knowledge, and very quickly realized that a large portion of people lack even the basic capacity to consciously think or to understand and perform conditionals. Conditionals being like if something happened kinds of statements. And here, you can see one of the first reasons why I said that I dislike naive approach to personality tests. They can be dangerous, because archetypes they speak about are modes of thinking of the higher Sephirot, telling someone who is not even training the skill of inner discipline and perception that he is this or that archetype is basically like cursing someone and causing a demonic possession. He does not possess even the basic skills to realize this, let alone handle it. There is a reason why the vast majority of humanity always needed a shaman to help them cast away such neuropsychological issues through ritual and belief. Kabbalah, as opposed to the personality tests, shows you the path of growth. We have now covered one of the 4 domains, the domain of Helix, the people of wood. From the sensual world of Malkuth, also called the inferior mother or the virgin, we now climb the bridge of senses to the 2nd domain. If the Helix are the people of the 1st domain, then the Gnostic word for people of the 2nd one would be psychic, not in the modern sense of the word. Coming again from the Greek, the word psyche means the soul, in a sense of the human mind, not the spirit. These are the people of thoughts. Domain of such people is built upon a triangle of Sephirot, Yesod being the middle one, connected to the lower realm, and the other 2 on sides being Hot and Netzach. Yesod is the place of ego and actively working personality. It has been called the machinery of the universe. It is basically a giant machine of your personality, as it is constructed by the higher Sephirot. It contains values and mechanisms and pendulums and opinions and everything else you use to, first, interpret your senses, and second, to act externally upon them. Yesod is not place of creation of values. This is the finished product that merely executes them. This Sephira is also a very mechanical one. It has a large, cyclical component to it. It is basically your inner clock. And all repeating and established patterns of your life are present here. The easiest way to show this are very basic, biologically given cyclical phenomena, such as your circadian rhythm, when you should sleep or be awake. Or this could also contain the menstrual cycle, or our reactions to the change of seasons. As you can see, these are in many ways adaptations to the periodical behavior of the outer sensual world, the sun and the moon moving essentially. But at the same time, they are inarguably very susceptible to psychological changes and ailments. For example, stress, fear, and all other negative emotions have incredible potential to disrupt any of your normal cycles. In more abstract view, Yesod contains patterns of typical behavior. We all know that we react in a certain learned way, be it our routine or response to extreme situations. We all have our weak spots, for example, and everyone knows if they poke into them, they provoke a typical reaction of anger or insecurity or something like that. Now, of course, we do not live in a perfect world, so this system contains both useful adaptations as well as our learned errors. The responsibility for its maintenance, repairs, transformation and growth lies in the 2 higher Sephirot. These 2 are living in a duality. They are 2 equal, contrasting methods. The left is Hot. It represents a masculine kind of energy, in the form of rational deconstruction. And opposed to it, at the right side, is the Sephira of Netzach, representing a feminine kind of energy, in the form of emotional intuitive inspiration. I will delve into their meaning some more, but I want to make something very clear. When I say masculine and feminine energy, I mean that people are statistically naturally born with certain talents. Men tend to be interested in understanding things while taking them apart, while women tend to be interested in feeling people while keeping them together. But despite us being born with talents, it would be foolish not to learn both to the best of our abilities. A mature person is one that goes beyond what was given to him by birth. I have said that both of these Sephirot are responsible for the maintenance of our personality, but I think, in a reductive, simplistic sense, it is useful to view it as a sequence of influences and to put the main responsibility for maintenance of personality to the feet of rational Hod, while the maintenance of rational Hod is responsibility of intuitive Netzach. This pattern of repeatedly going diagonally to left and then horizontally to the right is called the glyph of lightning flash or flaming sword. Anyway, giving Hod the responsibility for maintenance of our personality shows us this Sephira in a new light. It becomes a forge. You use the heat of deconstructive rational power to study unknown objects, to mend broken tools, and to repair and build your own personality. I suppose you can personally imagine, that you have studied something and you have realized some truths after achieving detailed knowledge of inner workings of the studied subject. And it changed how you value and react to the world through personality. This is the forging influence rationalistic Hod has on the personality of Yesod. And now, think about what was the thing that led you to study a specific subject. How did it spark your interest? Well, sparking an interest, this gravity of something worthwhile, does not itself come from understanding. It comes from prior intuitive feeling. You feel it is worthwhile to deconstruct and understand something. If not, you would not do it. Or, in the very least, you would be so incredibly bored, it would render all your studies null and void. It is responsibility of the feminine intuitive part of our brain to point in the general direction that should interest us. Netzach is responsible for guidance given to Hod. The world of emotions, feelings and inspirations has much less form than the rationalistic Hod, but it possesses much more force, much more energy. This duality is, in a sense, embodying a higher abstract duality of form and force, a duality we will keep encountering on our path through higher Sephirot. Now, given this overview of relations of this triangle, we can see the conflict and issues that can arise when we are not proficient enough in mediating a creative cooperation between its actors. I have heard many men say that they do not understand women because they are illogical. And I have heard many women say they do not feel comprehensible emotions coming from their male counterparts. In a grander scheme of things, one could say that the industrialized society has become also uneven in this matter. We are so obsessed by deconstruction, by data, by experts in their fields, and by certain blindness of rationalism, so much that we are lacking the necessary vision that points us in the right inspired direction of what is important through intuition. And such is the curse of psychics. They are trapped in this triangle, in an unharmonized state. The same as helics are prisoners of the lower domain of senses. They may excel in one domain. They may be incredibly rationally gifted, but utterly lacking in the feeling of importance, in the emotional priority. Or, on the other hand, they may be overflowing with creative emotional energy, but without any mature ability to contain it through a rational mind. And on both sides of this spectrum, the failing is essentially the same. They refuse to learn the language of the other domain and are interested only in the one that comes easy to them. They live under the illusion that one side should dominate and consequently rule their own life without any opposition. To understand is a verb of Hod. You can understand in the realm of Hod, in the realm of rationality. And to feel is a verb of Netzach. You can feel only in the realm of emotions, There is no point in trying to mangle one of these worlds into picture of the other. They are utterly different in their essence. What one has to do is first become proficient in the specificities of said worlds. If you want to learn about emotions, you have to learn how to feel. And if you want to learn about rationality, you have to learn how to understand. And only after you are proficient in both, you can start seeing shared echoes, to see images of the worlds projected between themselves. And then, finally, you can build a bridge, one that represents a seamless gradient, the seamless connection between these two worlds. Once you have achieved this fluent translation between both of these languages, you have become a master of the second domain. In such a state, you have fulfilled your potential as a psychic, and a whole new set of possibilities opens up to you, because you are no longer half blind to your own condition. You can start to perceive a bigger picture of the third domain. The first domain was one of helix. The second domain was one of psychics. The third belongs, in the Gnostic vocabulary, to pneumatics, from Greek word pneuma, meaning the breath or the spirit. This domain consists of a triangle very similar in its functioning to the psychic triangle of the mind below. This one could be called the royal triangle or the triangle of kings, for mastering this domain makes one similar to what we could imagine as a philosopher king, enlightened monarch, or in more practical terms, a leader. The welcoming Sephira here bears the name of Tiferet, and it plays a role similar to Yesod down below. It is both a product of those two higher Sephirot above, as is their equilibrium. Tiferet is something of a higher conceptual personality. It is the true self. Yesod is the mask of machinery we call personality. It is the ego, while Tiferet would place the role of birthplace of higher ideals, the birthplace of felt morality. This would be the instinctively felt correct and moral way of doing things. Some call this spirit true self, but you can also use a bit of a reductive term, superego, whatever tickles your fancy. A deep importance of content of Tiferet is the idea or realization of the necessity of sacrifice. This does not mean a precisely defined sacrifice for something specific. Such a concrete idea would be formulated by the lower Sephirot. This is just the abstract need for it. Your time is very precious. Every second is energy spent pulling you closer to your eventual demise, to your death. The preciousness of the time you have been given, and are losing every step of the way, is the ever-present sacrifice. Tiferet is the sacrificed king, and due to him being placed in the very middle of the complex system of this tree, it is said to be crucified. Here you can also see why he is in a special relation to the emotional intuitive Netzach. The inspiration that Netzach provides, the desire to focus on something, to understand something, or to create, is governed by the realization of the necessity of prioritization caused by your deeply sacrificial essence. Doing a hobby that you love means you are literally paying by your life for doing it. So choose well. Same as in the case of Yesod, Tiferet is governed or originates from the work of two higher Sephirot, named Geburah and Chesed. These two also exist in relation with their respective pillars. As Hod was a formal rational deconstruction, Geburah is the energetic force of destruction. This is the king of judgment, the one holding the sword. The need for sacrifice hidden in Tiferet originates in the necessary existential struggle. A good king always needs to consider when to use his sword, when to use, essentially, violence and destruction. You can imagine a gardener which, for the well-being of his kingdom, has to root out the weeds. This act of care is inseparable from the act of destruction, the act of judgment placed on the plants that were deemed to be dangerous to the larger harmony. And you do this, of course, in your everyday life. The same would go for the decision to root out vice, or remove an obstacle you encounter. You have an innate power to judge things as good or bad for any kind of harmony you seek. You face the world, which is dangerous and full of threatening elements. But one cannot conceptualize destruction or judgment before encountering harmony and prosperity themselves. Before you can imagine the idea of wound, of torn tissue, you first need to have concept of bodily integrity and of health. Such concept is chesed, lying in opposition to geburah. If the first one is the king with sword, then the second one is the king sitting on his throne, ruling and overseeing a prosperous kingdom. This is the wise, peaceful ruler, preceding the idea of violence itself. First one seeks harmony and growth, and only after these are endangered, there arises the need for judgment. The power of chesed lies in the ability to see the bigger picture. The king is considering his realm as whole. He understands it is a complex system. And he comes from a place of kindness, which is also the Hebrew origin of the name chesed. This is the place of communal sharing, charity, and mercy. In the context of our own existence, this is the prime goal of integrity of our mind. Failure to achieve this would be neurosis, an inner battle between parts that should be cooperating. The conflict between geburah and chesed can be seen in our society and in our struggle with the question of how we should wield power. How much do we want to cooperate and how much do we want to achieve through competition? The issue of disbalance in this realm results in very serious vices. Geburah should be the wise judgment, but without wisdom, the misplaced power of destruction becomes a cruelty. On the other hand, chesed, without the ability to judge, becomes an inert, fossilized bureaucratic echo of the already lost glory of prosperity, slowly fading away, and with it the hope for healthy growth. As I said at the beginning, these triangle's abilities correspond to the virtues of a wise ruler: to oversee prosperity, to judge the danger, and ultimately to understand the sacrifice these two higher functions demand. Until we are ruled by such mastery, until we reorient our society to put such people in the forefront of our decision-making, we shall be crushed by the blindness of the lower domain. Society cannot be led by experts obsessed with their specific fields. It has to be led by those who see the world in its complexity and are not bound by specificities of minuscule diversions. Holistic system thinking, but a wise one. One standing on firm mastery of both this domain and the lower ones. Mature, well-rounded, virtuous individuals. There is probably no portion of the human population that could truly claim their presence in this domain, let alone its mastery. For this is the domain of high conceptual relations of our own matter and energy. This is the domain of main physical laws in which our own mortality is embedded. You can symbolically see this on the fact that this high abstract triangle is upside down in comparison with the previous one. And that's because between our lived experience, our existence, and the deep truths at the top of the tree, there lies an abyss. One that is not to be bridged by us, at least as long as we are alive. There is no personal mastery here, only pure reality of existence. The Sephirot, Binah, Hokmah, and Keter, are basically the principles of mathematical creation of physical dimensions and related concepts. Binah represents the womb from which matter itself is born. This is the place where energy coagulates into clumps of structure. Binah takes the third place in this triangle it represents the possibilities of 3 spatial dimensions. As an analogous idea, you can look at 3D graphics and the fact that they are based on polygons, on triangles. Binah has been called the Great Mother, as opposed to the inferior mother of Malkut. But she has also been called the Terrible Mother. For all her descendants, these coagulated structures of form are born as temporary. They are susceptible to the teeth of time. Even the prime idea of healthy integrity of structure given to Chesed is preceded by the reality of its mortality. If we want to make the next step from the place of 3-dimensional Binah, we need to start slicing away dimensions. Taking away the 3rd dimension, we are left with Hokmah. There is no place for structure of a matter. Hokmah is the vector of energy. This is the idea of pure directional force. Also the idea of duality. Not specific duality, mind you, but the general concept of there being relation between 2 things on a line. And continuing again, removing the 2nd dimension, we are left with 1-dimensional point, Keter, meaning the crown. This is the concept and moment when all existence and all other lower concepts were compressed into one singularity, into one mustard seed, as it is said in the biblical parable, smallest of the seeds capable of growing a tree of full existence, the origin of light, a point with no diameter, no middle, and no end, the absolute. And above it, stripping the last dimension away, we step outside of the tree itself into dimensionless, conceptual Ein Sof Aur, meaning the limitless light. When we slice away Aur, the light, we are left with Ein Sof, the general idea of limitlessness, and finally, we slice again, and we are left with Ein, negative, non-existence, nothing. Together we have just went through a sequential path from the idea that we sense the world through the Sephira of Malkut up until the singularity of our universe hidden in Keter. And conceptually, we have witnessed its own rise from nothingness. Human story and psychology is as firmly embedded in the matter of our universe and its laws as is the rest of the outside world. And I find this whole ancient system of the order of the universe and its creation incredibly humbling. Just imagine, the idea of mathematical spatial growth from singularity is as old as is this ancient knowledge. And yes, they called it God, but that is a linguistical issue, not a religious one. The reason why it was worthy to call it God is because this incredible thing should be treated with respect and awe it demands. As long as we are embedded in the matter and energy of this universe, life, consciousness, and spirit are its inseparable attributes. If you'd like to know more about Kabbalistic teachings, I can point you in the direction of a book named Mystical Kabbalah, written by Dion Fortune. Though, in all honesty, I need to issue warning. This is an actual cognitive hazard, so proceed with caution and do not try to delve into things you are not prepared for. Be careful about it. The reason why I am suggesting this book is because Dion Fortune, as opposed to Aleister Crowley, who is an absolute warlock, is a priestess of light. She is much more mystical than occult. And I say this because I want to talk about her idea of the mystical and the occult. When you look at the tree, you can see 3 pillars. The left one is the pillar of severity, starting with rational deconstruction of Hod, continuing with destruction through judgment of Geburah, and ending with the birth of the idea of destructible structure itself in Binah. The right one is called the pillar of mercy, starting with intuitive constructive force of inspiration of Netzach, continuing with the care for prosperity and integrity in Chesed, and ending in the idea of moving vector of creative energy itself in Hokmah. These 2 shorter pillars on the sides are the one containing our archetypal subpersonalities. In the destructive force of Gebura, you can find, for example, the aspects of the Roman god Mars. Or in the emotional Netzach, you can find the goddess Venus. They themselves will contain many more smaller archetypal forces. The personality tests that I berated for their danger are focused on these sideway-laying archetypes. They are not us, they are purely here to help us, not to rule us. Occult magic is the one which strives to use the power of these unharmonized archetypes. Imagine you are, for example, collaborating with your friend and he, not knowingly, fell to some of these archetypes and is missing the bigger picture. He is missing a considerate harmony. One way to deal with this would be temporarily assuming the position of the opposite archetype with the goal of bringing more balance and harmony to the collective project. But beware, such a self-possession with an archetype is what is called ego inflation. You inflate your ego to fulfill an archetype which doesn't suit it well. This is a dangerous practice, because you are hurting your own vision and you are portraying something so extreme it's not natural to you. It takes energy, carefulness, mastery, and great deal of healing afterward. This is the danger of occult magic. As opposed to the occult, the central pillar starts in your body of senses in Malkuth, continues through the mask of personality in Yesod, fulfills its personal potential in the sacrificial wisdom of Tiferet, and finally leaves your body and moves into its origin in the singularity of Keter. This pillar is called the pillar of harmony. Mastering this realm with the sole goal of balance is the work of a mystic. This is the mystical craft, one which is in long term much more healthier because it focuses on your true existential essence as opposed to the great but pricey powers stemming from the willful damage to your inner harmony done through occult practice. Now, that being said, I am obliged to dispel one myth that I have perpetuated throughout this video, that the only path you can take on the tree is linear one, that our growth itself is linear. This is the case only in theory, only conceptually. In reality, you will always keep doing and repeating many paths and cycles of movement on the tree. There is no end to such work. There will always be a need to repair something here, to achieve a new skill there, or to re-evaluate the fragile deals and contracts you have made with the myriad of your subpersonalities. It would be false to believe that any mastery is absolute. Mastery actually consists of the willful decision to surrender oneself to the infinite dance of growth. True mastery is hidden in the realization that apprenticeship will never end. True mastery is accepting it, and accepting it with the great awe.